Hello and welcome to The Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. Each week, the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in finance take you beyond the numbers and hype, right to the heart of the big issues of the day. Today, we're training a lens on the next generation wealth transfer with Anastasia Deryagina, Head of Global Next Generation Solutions at UBS. Anastasia is joining us this week to discuss the great wealth transfer and how wealth managers can work most effectively with clients to ensure a smooth succession. She's also going to talk about UBS's ongoing partnership and the legacy of their relationship with the YIO, the Young Investors Organisation. This continues a partnership of almost 20 years standing, since Credit Suisse, now of course integrated with UBS, was a founding partner back in 2007. Anastasia will tell us why all of this is good for business and how connecting with the younger generation early and pre-transfer of wealth can make such a big difference. It's a delight then to welcome Anastasia Deryagina to the programme. Anastasia, great to have you with us. Look, let's start by talking about that great wealth transfer and acknowledging, I guess, in fact, that actually, far from a singular event, this is an ongoing process. Why is that distinction in and of itself important?
I think that distinction between the time when the actual wealth transfer happens and the time it takes till that event takes place is extremely important, especially from the perspective of the next gen. Many of them describe this as responsibility transfer first, and then much later in time, the wealth transfer comes last. And during that process of responsibility transfer, it's a gradual assumption of more and more responsibility by the next wealth owner from the current wealth owner. Some of that happens by design, when the family sits down and decides, all right, this is where we talk about this aspect of our wealth management portfolio, or we look at our real estate portfolio. And some of them happens by accident, or rather by as the life happens, right, where things come to realization by the individual family members who realize that all of a sudden there is an additional attention to the family for that reason. Could be a sale of a family business, could be inclusion of an additional partner into the family business. And those things become a catharsis for those conversations on responsibility transfer.
It's really interesting. And look, you mentioned family there. Do you think it's true, Anastasia, that in a way, even superseding the transfer of wealth, the transfer of values, whether they're family values or the values in a family-run or owned business, that's as or potentially even more important than that movement of wealth?
This is an excellent point, because we say wealth transfer is extremely important, but the way it is going to be deployed is defined not by the paperwork, not by the decisions that the family makes, but the family values that drive that deployment. Whether the family is concerned about the education first of their own family members, or whether the family is pricing the purpose or culture very highly, that will define how the wealth is deployed in the future. And now the families have a choice. They basically can either hope that the values that they've instilled into their next generation are sort of carried on and continued, and in some cases it works. And in some cases, they take a conscious decision to sit down and talk about these values. And we actually sometimes run a very interesting exercise where the family comes together and each of them gets a pack of value cards. And then each of them is supposed to first select an X amount of values that are relevant for them, and then a separate set that is relevant for their family. And then as we go and proceed with the exercise, they have to sort out things that are more and more and more relevant. And then there is a small set of cards in front of them, each of them, where we encourage the family then to discuss with the help of a family advisor or a wealth planner. And very interesting things come to play when these discussions take place. Well, in many cases, these values are shared, but people choose different words to describe them. And often just clarification about the different meaning of the word brings the family forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we'll come back to the difference or the similarities of intentions in just a moment. But I did want to ask you next about the Young Investors Organisation, because I guess one of the ways that forward-looking institutions like UBS can ensure they're delivering the best advice and managing the best outcomes is by building on and strengthening existing and making new partnerships. And that with the YIO is really, really interesting. And we should say this partnership goes back quite some time, a couple of decades on the Credit Suisse side, of course, post the integration. But bring us up to speed, Anastasia, here, and tell us a bit about why this specific cooperation is so important and actually why it underscores some of the points you've already made and UBS's facility in giving the very best advice to this demographic.
I think when we talk about the YIO partnership, it's important to go a little bit back into their origins. It's not an understatement to say that the idea of forming a partnership and a community came from the next gens themselves. Back in the days when they would come to a program organized by the bank and they would sit together and talk about the meaning of wealth and how they see their families progress in the future and how they want to take on that responsibility. One part of it was the bank experts who provided excellent advice. One part of it was academia who gave the top-notch sort of knowledge and their own experience of working with families that progress in their succession planning. But the third part, extremely important part, was exchanging with them, their peers, with the families which find themselves on the different parts of that wealth transfer journey. And in that group of people, you can find people who are at the same sort of very beginning of that and have started the conversations and learn from them how the conversations panned out and what worked and what didn't. But you could also talk to others who already progressed on the journey and see what's ahead of you and how you can prepare for that. And exactly that sort of incentivize the next gens to come together and say, okay, well, why don't we form a community which consists of people like ourselves who will go through this process, whether we want it or not, and who can benefit from each other's experience and expertise. And obviously, Credit Suisse standing right next to them and taking on the partner role has become an important catalyst for this organization because it started with a very small number of members who sort of just wanted to keep talking to each other and exchanging with each other. And it now is 2,000 members who organize themselves about 80 activities a year. And those activities range from peer coaching groups to larger conferences where they bring thought leaders and top thinkers to exchange on topics that worry them. Now, how does this help UBS? It's quite straightforward, really, because first and foremost, we learn a lot from them. So even that conversation we had at the beginning about how wealth transfer is a process is something that next gens tell us repeatedly. And for some of them, it's even a reverse process where the family has decided to bestow the whole wealth upon them at a very early age. But the responsibility, the decision making about that wealth comes with time. During this time, UBS has an opportunity to be their partner while really giving them a platform that enables and empowers them, where they make decisions, where they make the call on topics and people they want to engage with, and the way they drive the agenda.
That's fascinating, and let's interrogate that in a bit more detail. Can you tell us about the ways in which this cohort then plan to leverage that wealth in a truly sort of catalyzing way to make their capital catalytic? And I guess it's interesting how and why and where are the differences with those generations that preceded them?
I think here an important thing, again, we learn from the next gens themselves, is not every one of them is the same. And it would be not prudent to put them all in the same box and to say, oh, they're all very interested in philanthropy, or they're all into impact investment, or they're all changing the way their family businesses are running. All of them are definitely concerned about the future, and all of them want to make a world a better place. We hear a testament to that, not just in the words they say, but also in the actions they take when they take over the family businesses, the family office portfolios, and when they look at the agenda of those events that I mentioned before and create an agenda together with people who can help them formulate their own thoughts and visions of the future. Now, this is different from their parents because the parents or the current wealth owners have been creating the wealth as they speak. They've been running those companies and being entrepreneurs and their best and succeeding in what they do, based on their gut feeling. And so many of the decisions they make for their businesses and for their family offices are kind of innate. While with the next gen, they come into these situations. They haven't gone the same journey that the current wealth owner have done, and they need to make that journey. And for many families, that journey starts with taking responsibility for others, be it through philanthropic projects, be it through defining wealth purpose for the portfolios that is entrusted to the next gen, be it by instilling those values that we talked about. Typical one, really one that we encounter a lot, is education. The other one is health and well-being. Another one is fairness. And all of these things are sort of talked about in the families, which then sort of impacts how the next generation sees the world. And with that sense, also the organization basically encourages people who want to make a change in the world to become members and sort of drive this change together.
Tell me a little bit then, Anastasia, about the plan with YIO and how expanding that, growing that. You already mentioned some numbers earlier, 2,000 members, I think, in 20 hubs worldwide, more than 75 countries, incredible numbers already. That expansion and growth, what does it look like in the context that you've just described?
The one thing that we need to now look at is obviously the passing of time. The organization sort of came to life in 2007, where the oldest member back then was 30. We're now looking 20 years forward, and that oldest member is now probably 50. And funny enough, the average age of the YIO community is 34 to 35, depending on which year you're looking. And within that span of time, people's lives have changed. And what the YIO is facing now is obviously kind of a spread of ages and spread of life stages, which requires the organization to shape their offering, that it remains relevant for the 50-plus-year-olds, but it also is relevant for the 20-year-olds, not just by the nature of organization, but by the topics they address and how they do it. So addressing that segmentation together with the YIO is one of these kind of growth pillars. What can we do together to drive relevant sort of insights, both from the YIO, but also into the YIO, deploying the knowledge that the bank has. Second one is the regionalization. The growth is here. And obviously, as you rightfully said, when we say, 20 hubs, these are people who really are on the ground and look for the opportunities to develop their own hubs. They want to also make their hubs a place to meet and a place to be, and a place where the next gens not just get together and spend a wonderful time together and gain great experiences, but where they can also talk about projects that can help move a needle in any sense of things, or who could drive economic growth for their own companies or for their own industries. And with that wish to make regional hubs sort of life more interesting, obviously, again, the partnership offers tremendous opportunities, because with the UBS's global reach, we can support those hubs with content and with experts and with our own ideas on what can the members benefit from and how can they grow together. And the third one is about deploying that knowledge that is gathered within the YIO community, those insights they've gained over the last 18 years to the world. And I think that's probably one where I feel strongest about, because the questions that you and I are discussing, Tom, are really relevant for every inheriting next gen. What do I want to leave behind? How do I want to drive the family business? What is my meaning of wealth? Is this different from how my family sees it? Do we need to build bridges? And through a lot of experience and a lot of personal experiences, many YIO members have gone through those conversations already. And finding a way to deploy that knowledge back into the world can help many other inheriting next gens to make this whole process smoother.
Well, and to the point about process and the actual mechanics, Anastasia, I find it really interesting because you've already mentioned some of these priority areas, thematics, whether you're talking about education or forging partnerships. But I guess there must be differences, right? Whether you're talking about a family office or specific individuals, whether you're advising wealthy women. We know that the first kind of phase of the great wealth transfer, before even the intergenerational one, is often this one across genders, as women tend to outlive their spouses, for example, working with the entrepreneurial demographic specifically. It must be really fascinating, but also, I guess, quite challenging for you and your colleagues to ensure you're continuing to tailor and deliver for the specifically different needs of each of those different demographics.
Yes, we do. And I think it's quite important to keep that in mind, that none of them want to be pigeonholed in any of those categories. One thing that we realize working with the Next Gen daily is that in the course of one day, they will wake up as a sort of contributing family member, go through their morning as an investor, have a lunch as a philanthropist, have their business meetings lined up as a sort of a growing entrepreneur, and then in the evening meet up with other entrepreneurs to discuss about growing further opportunities of developing industries and the businesses together. And I have not even mentioned the social change maker role, right? And in the course of that day, it is obviously a pleasure, and not just a pleasure, it's an honor to be a partner that can help them grow in every one of those roles. So addressing those needs, those specific sort of demographics, as you described them, something we see the need of doing daily, but we also see the need of acknowledging different roles these people play and addressing those needs and roles in their entirety, and for the use of a better word, holistically. Because essentially, even if you're talking to a female inheritor, the one thing that will be defining how that person deploys their wealth or what they decide to do with their business is formed by the way they see themselves in the future. And if they don't see themselves as a wealth owner, then they're most likely to be a liquidity event. But if there is a strain of entrepreneurship in them, I think it's our job as a partner to help them develop that strain, be it with our entrepreneurial program, with the female founder programs, or the entrepreneurial academy, just to give that as an example. And vice versa, if someone decides to sort of step aside and leave the health management to the professionals and focus their life on making the world a better place through philanthropic activity, also there, I see us as a very strong partner in helping them understand not just how the philanthropy works and what the foundation structure looks like, but finding like-minded people who can help multiply the impact of their actions. And that's means that every time we look at those families, every time we see a client in front of us, we cannot assume that just because they're gender or their family history, that this is the direction they're going to. We really have to understand their needs individually and their ambitions as they come and help them grow in that specific direction.
Well, and perhaps a final thought, tapping into exactly what you've just said there about the importance of that personal approach, the humanity actually of what your advice needs to look like. And just to draw together UBS's strengths in this area, obviously, as the world's probably the largest truly global wealth manager, and one that has been recognised already for its specific aptitude and success in serving this next generation cohort, it's right that we should be talking about why UBS leads the way. But just tell us, I guess, more almost institutionally, strategically, structurally, how the bank continues to do this, and actually why, despite all of those successes, there is that knowledge that one can't rest on one's laurels. There needs to be that need to innovate, to keep pushing in terms of novel solutions. Just tell us a bit about that culture of success that UBS is committed not just to continuing, but actually to building upon.
Thank you, Tom. That's an excellent question because it basically allows us to summarize what we've been driving for the last 2 decades is making next gen business as usual. Right. The ambition has always been for everyone who works at the bank to think daily, what can I do for the next generation of my clients? And that means we have teams in place who can help drive awareness, but also deliver specific solutions, be it the Global Next Generation Solutions team that I work with, or the family advisory teams or the wealth planning teams. So there are specialists across the bank who can help deliver that. It also means that we continuously raise awareness, be it around the women's wealth or the next gen needs through publications, and really driving the message forward to, build stronger, as you said, human relations with this next cohort of clients. And then obviously the third one, being the truly global wealth manager, UBS is of course uniquely positioned because this next generation describe themselves often as global nomads. In the same manner that they move through their roles, as I mentioned before, they move through the world, and it's driven either by the place of their education or the place of their business or the place of where their family is based. And obviously with the global reach, we can really support them no matter where they are. And again, going back to the YO partnership, that alone showed us that having hubs in different countries, whenever the member moves from one to another, there is a hub manager to welcome them and say, look, we also have members here and this is how you can engage. And that immediately gives them a local network of impeccable quality, but also a great outreach. Second one is the holistic approach that allows us to cover the next generation in all their needs and entirety of their needs, be it as an investor, as a family business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a social change maker, or even as a person. Because often we get to know these next gens when they're 20, and we have the privilege of watching them grow into fantastic 35-year-olds who take on the family businesses and offices and further responsibility. And I would say with those kind of two things, the global reach and the holistic approach is something that UBS can uniquely offer. And of course, the partnership with YO being sort of the cherry on top of that cake, because we know that the next generation appreciate the connections. We know they are ready to be engaged and they want to be part of a network that brings a higher purpose, a stronger purpose to their life, where they can exchange with peers, but also have access to experts and specialists that they need to get to the next stage of their development.
That was Anastasia Deryagina, bringing us to the end of this edition here on Monocle Radio. Listen again and explore more at monocle.com, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can discover more and find out how UBS can help you at ubs.com. While you're there, search Next Generation to find more articles, info and resources from Anastasia and her colleagues. This is The Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.